who will anchor the discussion for us in conversation with Action SA President, Mr. Herman Mashaba. We will discuss the place and value of ethics in our contemporary world and how a nation such as South Africa goes about negotiating a shared ethical code. This webinar takes the shape of a roundtable dialogue to allow both of our discussants to ask one another questions should they wish to do so. Furthermore, our viewers who may wish to pose questions themselves can do so using the chat function. For members of the media who may be joining us this evening, a high-resolution recording of these proceedings can be made available upon request. I would like to thank our panelists. We welcome Hemang Desai, who is also joining us for this discussion this evening, for being with us. Thank you very much. And now, without further ado, I invite the President of Action SA and convener of the webinar series, Mr. Herman Mashaba, to start us off by delivering his opening remarks. Please welcome President Mashaba.
Thank you very much, Lerato. Good evening, South Africa, and thank you all of you who are joining us this evening to this very important engagement. A special word of welcome to Mr. Mukeshbhai Patel, the chairman of BAPS South Africa. All of us appreciate you making the time to be joining us this very evening. Over the past few weeks, fellow South Africans, Action SA has been hosting a series of webinars devoted to exploring the topic of ethical leadership in South Africa from a religious perspective. Importantly, we do not want to suggest that ethical leadership is the sole domain of religious or faith-based groups, but rather to recognize the role of religion as a guiding light to so many South Africans. Against this context, our webinars are engaging representatives of major faiths in South Africa to explore the role that religion can play in promoting a culture of ethical leadership in our societies. I believe this is crucial if we want to make progress as a country. Every day, we read stories about how our leaders are failing us, from outright looting to gross incompetence. This, fellow South Africans, has to change. As long as our country is being led by leaders who put themselves or their political parties they serve ahead of the people who elected them, we will not be able to address the many challenges that we face as a nation. In simple terms, restoring a culture of ethical leadership must be central focus of any plan to get South Africa on the right track. Since we started our webinar series, we have engaged with Reverend S.C. Mukabela, representing the Christian faith, and Mulana Abdul Khalik Ibrahim Ali, representing the Islamic community. Tonight, we will be talking to Mr. Patel, representing the Hindu community. What struck me about our engagement so far is that despite the theological differences between us, when it comes to the concept of ethical leadership, there is more that unites us than there is that divides us. This is something I've also experienced on a very personal level through my interactions with members of other faith groups during my time as a businessman and also recently as a mayor. I've always been inspired by the efforts of faith-based organizations to play their roles in addressing societal challenges such as poverty and substance abuse, especially when our governments fails to do so. It is the spirit of Ubuntu that I believe unites South Africans from all walks of life. I believe that if we can embrace this shared sense of community and look past our differences, we will be stronger as a nation and more capable of bringing out the change that our country so desperately needs. That is ultimately the purpose of our webinars, to remind South Africans that when all is said and done, the vast majority of us are good, law-abiding people that want to see our country work. We must act as one to build an inclusive, prosperous future for South Africa, because together, as all South Africans, we can make a difference. On that note, I would like to hand back to Lerato to facilitate the rest of the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mashaba. Just on the point of correction, the leader who did address us for the Christian faith was Pastor S.C. Matebula and not Mkabela. So I note that one. Chairperson Patel?
My sincere apologies. You remember what happened when we had the on his screen originally had Mkabela when we had the preparation. And my sincere apology, Reverend Matebula.
Just in case he's watching this
just
webinar, Reverend Matebula.
I owe him a big apology.
That's all right. Without further ado, let me bring in Chairperson of the BAPS South Africa, Mr. Patel, to give us your opening remarks just before we carry on with the discussion. Mr. Patel, the floor is yours.
In divine presence of Almighty and our beloved Guru, Mahan Swami Maharaj, I offer my salutations at their lotus feet. Namaste, Vanikum, Jai Swami Narayan to all the listeners. Namaste is a greeting recognized across the globe now. With this greeting, I acknowledge the inherent divinity within you, and I greet that divinity in you. Jai Swami Narayan literally means victory to the eternal soul and the eternal presence of God in that source of unlimited power, which helps us to overcome our daily challenges. So this is a meaning of Namaste and Jai Swami Narayan. First of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Mashaba and Lerato, for having us here today. I'm grateful, and I have to acknowledge that you have recognized the diversity of South Africa and the different faith we have in this country. The dialogue, I hope, will bring various faiths together. I'm humbled to be representing the Hindu faith in this dialogue today. It's very significant that today this dialogue is taking place in South Africa. It was Mahatma Gandhi who stayed in this country 22 years, and he started the dialogue of ethical leadership. He studied the cardinal scriptures of Hindu faith, Bhagavad Gita. Not only that, but he studied Bible and Quran. He involved in correspondence with Tolstoy and British philosopher Ruskin. He developed his ethical leadership and his value system after deep studying of all the faith, all the religious books, and he accepted what was in his own goals and philosophy as ethical leadership. I always tease my colleagues when I studied in India that you sent Gandhi and we gave you Mahatma back from South Africa. So that's a gift of South Africa to India, which is the biggest gift we could have given. I want to say in this spirit of Hindu faith and dialogue, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, and Vanchnamrit. Vanchnamrit is a text which belongs to the Swami Narayan Sampradaya, where we, myself, Hemant Desai, and many others, thousands in South Africa follow. The Hindu religion is about dialogue between an individual in pursuit of better tools for self-awareness and social harmony. I approach the dialogue today in that spirit, which my Guru, His Holiness Pramukh Swami Maharaj, said that at United Nations Assembly, that what is mine is right. You must discard that. You must adapt. What is right is mine. If you take that approach, we will have understanding. And he got at the Millennium Conference in 2000 a standing ovation from all the religious leaders and Ted Turner. I would say that philosophy we should embrace in our dialogues today. And I hope that we carry that mantra of Pramukh Swami said, in a simple words, in joy of others lies our own. And that itself describes the ethical leadership. If that is followed all over the world and in every walk of life, I think we will have a better society. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairperson Hemang. Let's not forget about you. Is there anything that you would like to add from Chairperson Patel's remarks?
Firstly, thanks Larato and Mr. Mukeshbhai for having me as well. Namaste and Jai Swaminarayan. I think he summed it up well when Mukeshbhai spoke about Pramukh Swamiji's words at the United Nations Millennium Conference. We often get caught up in political, religious philosophies of because I've studied it and I've accepted it, it must be right. Whereas Pramukh Swamiji proposed at the time that if it's true and if it's good, I should be able to adapt it into my philosophy. So I think Mukeshbhai has struck a good chord to start off the conversation with this point, and I do commend him for that.
Just to add to that, I call it the dialogue, the title. What he said at the assembly is, we have dialogue with God. We have dialogue with our followers, but we have forgotten to have dialogue amongst ourselves. And if we have that, there is no need for this conference.
Very, very true. Hemang touched on something, and I want to explore it a little bit. I've asked it of all of our faith leaders before. The idea, the question that religion and politics, in this case, you know, we are in the political space, that those two should not mix. From a Hindu perspective, we had, you know, responses from the other faiths in the last two webinars that we have had. I want to get a sense from you whether you believe the same, or whether you believe that those two should be mutually exclusive.
I think, Larato, it's a good question, and I'll have to answer just by laying out a few technical terms to kind of build a framework or show the lens of the Hindu faith in this regard. So do forgive me if the jargon is too heavy. I'll be happy to hash out any terms later on. Since the colonial period, and as we know, the British Raj was present in South Africa as well as India at the same time. And it was a time in which the colonialists were exploring all faiths that they encountered in different lands. And as we find in many different cases, even in South Africa, a lot is lost in translation. So what happened in the Hindu instance is they couldn't really pinpoint, great scholars couldn't pinpoint a word that would perfectly translate from the Hindu faith to English, which would correlate to religion. And the word that was settled upon was dharma. However, dharma is different from religion technically and has many facets. Hindus have been called the people not of the book but of the library, because as we can appreciate, over 5,000 years, many ideas are developed, taken forward, taken in different directions. So the term dharma has really evolved over many millennia in the oldest scripture of the entire Hindu faith, which is respected and shown allegiance to by all denominations or sects. The Rig Veda, The Rig Veda uses the word dharma 56 times. And in most of these instances, dharma has been translated or has been used to mean duty. Later on in the Mahabharata, which is an epic, very vast text, which you can compare to the Iliad and the Odyssey of the Greeks in its expanse and the amount of topics it has discussed. Dharma has been used to signify something that sustains or upholds. So dharma is that which upholds, and another word has been used for something else, which has been called mat, and mat is belief. So millennia ago, mat or individual belief and dharma, or a common framework for everyone to follow, has been established by the Hindu faith. So in a multicultural society, I'd argue that dharma is in fact the constitution of the land, which is binding for all citizens, regardless of faith. And mat are our personal beliefs, and the two are intertwined. Dharma allows people of different mat or different philosophies to practice their philosophy of faith separately, while adhering to a common cause or a common set framework of laws and code of conduct. And therefore, Hindu thinkers made the distinction between dharma or common framework and personal belief many millennia ago. And because this thought has developed over a long period of time, I'd argue that this great expanse of knowledge may have something to offer the South African political sphere. Therefore, a Hindu voice at such meetings is useful.
Fantastic. Mr. Mashaba, you want to come in? I'm reading your body language, and it says Herman gave you a lot of food for thought. You care to share?
Thank you very much, Lerato, for giving me the opportunity. And thank you so much, Mr. Patel, for your opening remarks, and Herman for your deeper sense of what the Hindu religion actually stands for. And I think one thing that is actually coming out quite clear over the last 3 sessions, now this being the 3rd one, it's actually coming quite clear that my personal experience of engaging with South Africans of all faith, I've actually come to really believe that as much as we might have theological differences, but ultimately, in terms of morality, in terms of ethical compass, we all really believe in the same thing. We all believe in God. But I think I would like to really then put it to you as a Hindu, from a Hindu perspective, to make it easy for South Africans to actually understand. We are sitting at the moment in a country where there's a massive moral decay. Remember, many years ago, President Thabo Mbeki even had to really raise the question of moral regeneration in our country. That just led to this moral decay, and that's what prompted us as Action SA to bring in faith-based organizations to share this journey with us. In simple language, simple terms that anyone can understand. What do we mean by ethical leadership from a Hindu perspective?
I will answer that. Ethical leadership suggests to me that the type of leadership that allows leaders to live fulfilling lives while ensuring the development of those that they are serving and they are responsible for. Let me try and explain this by example. Bill Clinton met His Holiness Pramukh Swami Maharaj, and he said, "Your heart is of gold." And people surrounding him asked, "What do you mean?" And he said, Pramukh Swami puts others before him. And that was ethical leadership. In our Hindu scriptures, we talk about nirlop, that is no greed. Niskam means no lust. Nisnehi means no attachment. Nirman means no ego. When this was 5 pillars of our Hindu scriptures were told, today in modern society, even in India, people said it's not possible. But we have a living example. Our current Guru, His Holiness Mahant Swami Maharaj, and our Guru Parampara, that's the lineage, Pramukh Swami Maharaj, they have practiced this. And that's where you find millions, hundreds of people, thousands of people in South Africa who haven't even met Pramukh Swami, the young people. They are following these principles, and that has led to moral regeneration in our community, in our organization, and worldwide. And I believe it's very important that we take this forward.
Okay, I think let me also then bring another perspective to this, because yes, we talk about ethical leadership, but society also, what is the role that we believe that society has to play in this whole mix? Because society, yes, has got to really be led by ethical leadership, but ultimately the millions of followers out there, what is our responsibility?
If I may take that one, it's interesting the way you pose the question, because some years ago the ex-president of India, Mr. APJ Abdul Kalam, who was actually a scientist, a nuclear scientist, and a practicing Muslim with a very good grasp of the Quran, posed the same question to Pramukh Swamiji, who Mr. Patel alluded to. Pramukh Swamiji, on the other hand, was not very well educated in the modern sense and was also a Hindu monk. So we had a Muslim president speaking to an an uneducated Hindu monk, and Pramukh Swamiji kind of gave a three-pronged response. The setting of this dialogue was when Dr. Kalam said, if we want to rejuvenate a nation, he was talking about India, but we can apply it here. He had a 4-point plan, and he asked Pramukh Swamiji for his inputs, to which Pramukh Swamiji said, add the 5th leg of spirituality. Then we get into a bit of a quagmire, a gray area. Spirituality according to whom? So Pramukh Swami Maharaj spelt it out in the simplest terms and broke it into 3 points. And it seems to me, if we use the lens of sociology of political studies, Pramukh Swamiji proposed a bottom-up approach, where he first spoke about self-awareness, wherein individuals at a very ground level, in the households at least, have to think about what their strengths may be that they can add to a society, and also how they may improve to be able to serve society better. So self-awareness and awareness of your circumstances and the circumstances around you. Second, Swamiji proposed hope. And Dr. Kalam took the idea of hope forward by proposing that hope, when expanded, means a common agenda for your immediate society, whether it's at a town level or a city level or etc., expanding so on and so forth, and creating an atmosphere where everyone feels that they are going to benefit the agenda you are proposing. Often we may feel that one more white paper has been proposed, one more speech, one more tweet, but what do I get out of it? So an agenda where people feel that their contribution also takes them forward. And lastly, Pramukh Swamiji proposed compassion, in the sense that everyone who is self-aware, everyone who buys into a program is still going to make errors, big or small. Yet, if we can apply the tool of self-awareness again and again, which is self-study reflection, we can always rework the plan, relook at things find new solutions. In the Bhagavad Gita, which was so beloved of Gandhiji, it is said that he who sticks to the truth or the truth within his aims automatically gains knowledge. So working in the right direction allows you, moving forward basically just makes the path clearer. It's often that we don't take the step forward. And the Gita proposed, and this idea was picked up by Gandhi, that set your goal and at least start, and things should become clear as you go on.
Hemang, the points that you make are very salient, and you make me feel hopeful that in fact, if people had a plan and it looked like this, it's a 4-point plan, you can add different points to it and get people behind it. But you also mentioned that, we are at a point now in South Africa where people are tired of the plans, right? How do we regain the trust of society again to say, if a Lerato Ngobeni or a Herman Mashaba or a Hemang Desai comes before me in my community and says to me, South Africa, we need to move forward in this way. Here is what I am proposing. How do we get people to galvanize behind that idea? And I ask this based on what we hear people say when we visit them to talk about, the work that we're doing, that people feel that they're being used. They feel that they're not part of that part 3, in fact, that they have something to benefit out of what we are trying to do because they've been abused so much. How do we press the restart button from what you've just articulated?
So Lerato, I don't think I can give you a precise answer. But having listened to the 2 previous weeks, listening to myself speak and listening to Mukeshbhai speak as well, I think because we're coming from the religious side, we do sound overly idealistic. There are certain ground realities and things that develop daily that people who are lost in the books or in ideas might not take cognizance of. So let me try and give you a realist perspective from the Hindu faith. And there's something very interesting called the logic of the fish. And it basically says that in a perfect system, the largest fish in an ecosystem only eats the fish that it's supposed to eat. And the fish below it also eats accordingly. And thereby, everyone eats according to their rank or where they find themselves in society. Now, I'm aware that today in South Africa, eat has become slang for something like taking a bribe of coke money. But the idea proposed here was, in fact, that in whatever role you find yourself, only extract what is rightfully yours. And it proposes that when the ecosystem falls out of balance, and any marine biologist would have to forgive me and the proponents of this theory if the marine world doesn't work like this. But if the largest fish in the water starts to eat the algae or the plankton, and therefore the larvae cannot feed, and the entire chain of the ecosystem is broken, we have basically 4 things. Number 1 is upheaval, where people start going for each other, or let's say fish start cannibalizing and eating each other. And naturally, number 2 is disease, where when you eat what you're not supposed to eat, there's a great, the system is completely out of balance. And number 3 and 4 are there's a complete breakdown of who is supposed to eat, because we've begun to eat each other. And then number 4 is extinction. In political terms today, it would probably mean a failed state or a broken state. So the logic of the fish proposes that leaders or the biggest fish in a pond have to start off by taking only what is theirs, or behaving in a manner where they show that I only extract what is mine to extract, and thereby everyone gets what they also deserve to get, I think in the Western sense, this has a lot of echo in the theories of Locke and Hobbes, who said life is nasty, brutish, and short. And therefore, some type of law has to be in place to safeguard everyone's benefit. So in short, leaders have to take only what is theirs, not more. Be very clear about this, and that should set the example for the rest of society. And I do recognize that when we feel a system is broken for a long time, it's much more difficult to turn the tide against us eating each other or eating what is not ours to eat.
Mr. Patel? You are on mute.
I understand and I feel the pain because we have many businesses and I have staff working for us. And under our president's program, we had employed the unemployed youth, when it was offered. And when I asked them that, are you going to vote? Young African, all of them, 14 of them said no. They're not going to vote. So I asked them why. And they were despondent. They said the system doesn't work and it's corrupt. What's the point? Now, I believe it's this dialogues like this has to be on the national TV channel. Vigorous debate has to be there. And all religious groups, immaterial of our political differences, have to come together and pray, not just million. We should reach Guinness Book of Record, having 10 million or 30 million people praying at the same time and sending a clear message to all political leaders that enough is enough. And if that action is taken, I think we will have moral regeneration and people having more faith in our system. And at the same time, we will have to religious leaders. I think it's our dharma. Hemang, I want to correct you. It's not dharma. That's the English pronunciation. It's dharma. Not dharma. It's dharma. And I would say it's our duty to educate and send our congregation in every faith and every religious group to go and vote. That's the biggest weapon available to us in this democracy. And that's the only way we can succeed. Otherwise, we will have a failed state.
I mean, we've had this conversation in a very interesting way because we're almost we've evolved toward the end of what is ideal. But let us start back and ask, what went wrong? How did we get here? Society was there, we were all watching. How did we get here?
Lerato, can I just really come in there? And obviously, this my comments will obviously lead to Mr. Patel and the son to properly and appropriately respond to this. This afternoon I happened to do some visits in town, and in one of the buildings, I think it'll break your heart as a human being. You look at young lives being wasted, unemployed, just sitting there, nothing to do, and you look at their living conditions. And exactly to Mr. what you're saying, that they're not interested in politics. They actually don't realize that it's politics that have put them into this environment. And they're the ones who are going to really fix this, because the system, this broken system today, is not going to be fixed by us having this discussion in this platform on our own. Every individual South African, just under 60 million of us, we have to really look at ourselves in the mirror and say, what role can I really play? But at the end of the day, as Lerato said, what really went wrong for us to fight for many years, for over 300 years, we fight for freedom, and we get it ultimately in 1994. And now, 27 years, fast forward to 2021, we are worst off. We are the most unequal society in the world. We are the most violent society in the world. We lose, as a country, we lose more people violently than countries which are at war. We are less educated. We are more divided and so forth. Then we've got to ask yourself, because Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu spoke about this rainbow nation that really made us proud as South Africans. But then really what went wrong when you look at it as from the eyes of a Muslim community based here in South Africa, being a South African?
I would answer that we have forgotten compassion. I would define compassion as the ability to understand the problems of others and would force oneself to reassess one's personal goals. I would say the leadership, whether religious leaders, political leaders, or NGOs, if we understand the problems at the ground level. And I would again give example of our Guru Pramukh Swami Maharaj and Man Swami Maharaj. He has written millions of letters. And what do those letters contain? Not spirituality, having nirvana or moksha, but it's day-to-day mundane problems. Recently, from our congregation, the metric results were out. And at least 20 letters went to His Holiness, asking for his blessings, asking how we can get into university, what course to take. We have fees or there's a financial issue, and all of them received an answer. I can tell you that today, Lerato or Mr. Mesaba or anybody else, if you write a letter to His Holiness, stating your problem, it could be silly thing that you want to buy a car and you don't have money. You will get an answer. That is the touching people's heart into day-to-day life. And that's what we have lost in this current climate. Not only in this country, the divide has become greater in all over the world. It's 1% versus the 99%. And that's what, if as political leaders, religious leaders, we understand the compassion and follow through, I think we'll be raising that hope, and we can change the broken society we are in. Thank you.
Wow. I want to come back to that. Mr. Mashaba, when Mr. Patel spoke about the youth being apathetic and wanting to opt out of the political process, you mentioned that if it's politics who got us into this mess, can politics sincerely be the solution then?
Well, I think let's look at ourselves as human beings. There's no human being who's not a political animal. I find it always very strange when someone says, I'm not a political, I don't want to get involved in politics. You refuse or distance yourself from politics at your own peril, because human beings, we are political animals. Our success and our failures are dependent on our participation in politics. Yes, some of them will get directly involved in politics, some of them will work in NGO space, some of them will build strong families and so forth. But ultimately, everything else that we do as human beings is around politics. Anyone who obviously divorces yourself from politics, you do this at your own peril. Any nation that is going to succeed, if you look at successful democracies all over the world for the last 250 years, successful nations are dependent on civil society taking an active role, holding politicians accountable. United States of America has given us an example. The last 4 years, Americans were unhappy. What happened? November last year, Americans came out in numbers. A country that the richest nation in the world should really be comfortable, go and play golf and so forth, came out and says, not in our name. They had all-time historical records. Now you can imagine a country like South Africa, which is on the opposite end of the United States of America. We've had elections in 2019. Over 50% of our people didn't come out to vote. 18.3 million South Africans, as opposed to 17.6 who voted. So if we obviously uses that kind of an approach that we are not responsible, unfortunately, and it has been proven throughout history, the more society divorces themselves from politics, the more they suffer. And that's really where South Africa is going right now. That's why we need to work and act as one, be political leaders, religious leaders, civic organizations, at individual levels, to really take the responsibility and recognize that political leadership in particular has to really be held accountable. Otherwise, then we must accept the consequences that this country will collapse. And if this country collapses, it can reach a stage where it is impossible to reverse the damage actually caused.
So for the benefit of those watching, and I'm echoing my own thoughts on this one, I'm almost imagining a scenario where we almost either institute a Marshall Plan so that we all move together in one direction. And it seems a very mammoth task, right? Like, and I'm looking at you, Hemang, for this answer, because you're of a young generation. You're of the crew that Mr. Patel is talking about here, who are opting out of the system. What do you propose we do? How do you propose we get everybody galvanized behind the same thought as one South Africa, irrespective of our each individual political persuasions?
Well, based on the fact that Mr. Mashaba gave the example of America, I think because it's a very, all countries watch what happens in America. So it seems that there, the dialogue was so widespread that it had a dominoes effect, and groups that were not going to vote came out to vote. People who were unlikely to vote in certain age groups came out to vote, and people who vote traditionally in one way voted the other in certain areas. And that's because it seems to me that regardless of which medium it was, there was a push from both directions, from everyone who had a stake, to say something big has to happen. So I wonder whether South Africa is at that point now. And I also wonder, if we study history, what does it take for us to reach that tipping point? We can take the French Revolution as an example. We can look at maybe even the independence of India from the British, and how that catapulted Ghana and then gradually the rest of Africa to have a knock-on effect. So I think a study of history and politics should be able to inform us about what really creates this moment, powder keg moment, where people say enough is enough, I'm going to go out and vote. But practically, I think this type of apathy may have come out because people have begun to believe that they can only vote through their political vote. That's not always the case. What we study and where we end up is also part of how we take the nation forward. Where we decide to work in whichever industry, and how we decide to work is also has political ramifications. And really, how we spend our last 50 rands or our last 5 rands also has political ramifications. Therefore, I haven't studied really the proudly South African campaign that successive governments have tried to champion. But economically, when we buy South African, for example, we are casting a vote to say that my friends are not employed right now, and by passing this my rand forward in a South African ecosystem, I propose that I'm going to spend my money in a way that restores, if I may go back to my earlier example of the logic of the fish. So to sum up, I would say that we have to decide or study and find that point in South Africa where we would say that history teaches us at this point, if we take action, we can have a huge effect.
Mr. Mashaba, thank you for that. And I give this to any of you, in fact, because Hemang's comments make me think about, if we're using the American example, to be a function of identity, right? Do you think that it's a function of South Africans not really having a true sense of who we are and what we deserve? I say this because, you know, in the American context, there is the idea of what constitutes an American and the rights which an American should enjoy as a citizen, and who needs to occupy spaces of power and authority in politics to be able to make the American dream, so to speak, be a reality. Do you think that South Africans, in and of ourselves, aren't or haven't fully grasped what we are entitled to as South Africans, and therefore our leaders have a responsibility to make true our aspirations?
I think, Lerato, if one looks at the South African, or the birth of our democracy in 1994, we had great leaders, Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu, who sold us this dream of the rainbow nation. Beautiful concept, because we are a rainbow nation, whether we like it or not. And I think it's, for me, as a Christian, as someone who believes in God, is that this is the making of God. And every time people try and really work against what God wants, that's when that society is bound to fail. And right now, if you look at how divided we are, but the first 5 or so years of our new democracy, I think for us, it was great. We won the World Cup. We won the African football, and you know, for me, I used to travel in the past. Before I had an opportunity to travel the world quite extensively during the dark days of this country's history, and all the time being ashamed of my country. And now, then came 1994, became a proud South African, became a patriot. Today, I can't say the same. And that's something that I think is of concern to me, because I'm a patriot. I love my country. It's just that I don't like what is happening. That is why I thought of this idea of saying, how do we get our religious leaders? How do we get civil society? How do we get individuals involved? Because one thing for sure is that there's no human being who can divide us. You can divide us by force, but ultimately, this whole country will pay a heavy price, not us, but future generations. So I think what we do, we have to really bear in mind is that whatever we do today, future generations are the ones that are going to pay the price, like it's already happening. You take this country's debt levels are sitting at almost 88%, will be close to 100%. So basically, Lerato, your great-grandchildren are already in debt. How they're going to get out of this, it's another subject matter for another day. So what I'm saying is, if we're going to be collapsing this country, we are doing injustice to future generations. So we have to do everything in our power, as individuals, as groups, as religious groupings, and so forth. In fact, I wanted to really pose a question to Mr. Patel regarding the role of the family in this whole dynamics, because we spoke about the leadership, we spoke about civil society. Is there any way, do you see a role of families playing a role in rebuilding this broken system, this broken society that is in big trouble?
Yes, I do. In fact, our Guru, and it's a must for us, we say a prayer, Om Sahna Vavatu Sahno Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karma Vahe Tejasvina Vadittamastu Ma Vidvisha Vahe Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hema, I request, can you just translate this for me in a better English? Then I will carry on.
So it means may we stay together, may we share our knowledge and also our bread, and may we prosper together. It said in the context of a family, but also in the context of an exchange of knowledge. And finally, it ends with Om Shanti Shanti. Shanti, Shanti meaning peace. And the meaning attributed to saying it thrice is that a peace that starts within oneself can resonate in one's immediate surroundings and then in the world. So that if it doesn't start in one's immediate surroundings, it's unlikely to spread.
Again, I would add there that family values, sitting together, beside eating together, we have a prayer session not just a prayer session, it's for 30 minutes and it is time allocated where the head of the family, you don't speak, but you allow your children, your wife, others to participate. You pray for 5-10 minutes, you read something and they participate. That way, the communication in the family improves. I can guarantee you that our Guru has assured, and I've seen many examples, these books written now, and people are doing research on this, that family which eats together, prays together, and then finds 30 minutes. Today we are on the cell phone, we on laptops, we have no time. And then TV is the biggest enemy. We have no time, people are watching programs, so the family time is gone. And I am proud to say in our congregation, we have young people. Today, young people don't follow their parents, but we have a guru whom they haven't seen for 2 years. But those young children don't watch TV, or they watch TV, but it's related to either news and not any other program. They stick to what they have to do. And that's why all the families have more time. And we got to find time as a family to communicate and talk and find each other. And then we can impose the value system on our children and others. But the charity begins at home. It has to start with parents, not just teachers in the school. And church can get involved, or the temple, or the synagogue, or the mosque can get involved. The principle has to be, let's understand others in the family, be it wife, be it children, be it others. And if we follow that, I think we will have a family value, which will help our nation.
Thank you so much. In the last stretch of our conversation, really in the last 3 or 4 minutes, each of you, if you could wave a magic wand and hand pick our leaders, each of you, give me a quality, not more than 2 of those qualities. You don't have to explain them, but just for us, for the benefit of South Africans watching out there. What are their qualities? Let me start with you, Hema.
Well, I'll stick to my original story of the fish, and I'd argue eat what is yours to eat and make sure everyone gets to eat as well.
How would you sum up that quality in one word?
You'll have to come back to me. Let Mr. Patel speak.
Mr. Patel.
Introspection and honesty to yourself before honesty to others. It's like looking into the mirror and you will see yourself, how beautiful or how ugly you are. That's one.
Mr. Mashaba? Oh,
and
are you go ahead.
Compassion and understanding people at the grassroots level. Thank you.
Mr. Mashaba?
I think, for me, ethical leadership would entail selflessness. I think because of my upbringing, I was born and brought up in a society where your success is dependent on the success of people around you. I don't want to really live in a society where people are poor. I don't want to live in that society, because there's no reason for society or people to really be poor, more especially in a country as rich as South Africa. So I think what drove me ultimately to really be in a political field, something that I never thought I would really do in my life. But then I looked at my privileged position over the last just under 40 years of being in business to say, this is abnormal, but I cannot really blame myself. So the best I can do is to go and help others climb up the ladder. And that is really I believe that I think this is the kind of leadership that this country at this point in time, unfortunately, and really I'd like to repeat this, unfortunately, that we lack. People are in political, they enter politics to really serve themselves, unlike actually saving others. And I always, really, every time I relate this to people, related exactly the same as when you're in business. When you're in business, you come out with a product. You can't come out with a product that you like. You've got to come out with a product that people are going to buy, like, not you, because you are not the buyer, So you can't look at yourself. You've got to really look at the buyers. Is my product actually appealing to them or not? And I think the same principle for me, it happens exactly the same in a political environment. So you can't just look at yourself. If you want society to look after you, look after them.
Hemang, thank you, Mr. Mashaba. You found your word?
I hope it's not too crude or crass, but I would say economics with empathy.
Empathetic economy.
What do you mean by that, Hemang? Can you just elaborate?
In less than half a minute.
We've got just 2 minutes left.
I think it's an extension of what you said, that I'm not going to spend my money in a way that I know I'm going to take shortcuts that might short someone else. And I'm also going to behave in a manner in the market where I know whatever I'm involved in has a positive effect on someone else, wherever that person may be.
I did warn you that these webinars go by really fast. We have 1 minute left. Mr. Patel?
Yeah, I just want to, before we close, I have to take this opportunity to say that we're building a temple in North Riding, which Mr. Mashaba has visited. It's going, beside the temple, it's going to be a multicultural center. And I really pray and hope that we can involve community at large and it becomes a place of vibrant discussion for future generations to come. It's going to be an architect marvel. It will be a gift to South Africa for generations to come. And that is a project we're hoping, and I hope all the listeners and everybody, we will invite you and you can participate in that. You will be a proud South African, I'm sure.
Well, there you have it, South Africa. My word is servanthood, for people to remember that they are in public office to serve others and not themselves. Thank you so much to my panelists. I really thank you for the time you've spent with us this evening. Thank you to our viewers. And with that, I say namaste.
Namaste. Jai Swami.